This is CBC Windsor. I'm Jennifer LaGrassa. Katarina is away. We begin tonight with a visit from a top Liberal leadership contender. Mark Carney was in Windsor this morning, telling people what he plans to offer if voted in as Prime Minister. CBC's Pratush Dayal reports.
Mark Carney wants to be the next leader of the Liberal Party, and right by the Gordie Howe International Bridge, he shared how he would steer the country. And he has a local believer. Windsor Tecumseh MP Eric Kuzmiachuk is endorsing Carney as the next Prime Minister, calling him a great friend of our community.
Someone who knows how to build, someone who knows how to fight for Canada and fight for workers and for Canadians.
Talking about Trump's impending tariffs, Carney says Canada needs to diversify its trading partners and focus on boosting its own. Carney supports the government's negotiations so far and says he understands the uncertainty that prevails here, being on the front lines.
This is one of the great commercial relationships, engineering relationships in the world. So I think what we would want to do is to have the discussions starting with particularly the industries in Windsor-Essex. In other words, I'll start with automotives and all the components of the automotive supply chain.
Carney says his government will also look into the federal EV incentive plan.
With respect to EV incentives, the climate plan that we announced last week, which focuses on having large polluters pay for climate-smart choices, that creates the ability and resources that could provide additional incentives for through federal programs for EV.
What Carney wouldn't give was firm answer on whether or not he'd bring back the federal $5,000 EV rebate. Carney says he understands Trump's concerns around fentanyl crisis in the States, but says Canada is a sovereign and will never become the 51st state.
While America engages in a war on woke, Canadians will continue to value inclusiveness. While America shuns the vulnerable, we will continue to show solidarity with one another.
If elected, Carney pledged to fix the Canadian economy and provide a middle-class tax cut. So far, Carney and Chrystia Freeland are seen as the two front-runners in the race to succeed Justin Trudeau, having secured the most number of caucus endorsements. Pratush Dayal, CBC News, Windsor.
Windsor's chief of police has announced his retirement less than halfway through his contract. Jason Belair will leave the force in November. He signed a 5-year contract that began in December 2022. He's the second consecutive chief to resign before the end of his contract. The previous chief, Pam Mizuno, worked only 3 years of a 5-year contract. An early morning house fire has left one person dead. Fire crews were called to Askin Avenue around 7 a.m. The name of the person who died has not been released. A firefighter's hand was injured fighting the blaze. What caused the fire has yet to be determined. We're turning now to the provincial election campaign. The Ontario NDP is promising to end homeless encampments. The party says it'll do that by adding tens of thousands of supportive housing units. It's a clear contrast to the recent encampment plan by the previous PC government. Queen's Park reporter Lorenda Redekop has the story.
NDP leader Marit Stiles places the blame squarely on the previous government for the rise in people living in tents.
Doug Ford has failed the people of Ontario, and we're going to fix it.
She says as she becomes premier, she'll get rid of encampments by adding 60,000 supportive housing units and also upload the funding of shelters from municipalities to the province. She continued her attack on Ford.
He has failed on housing. He has failed on health care. He has failed on creating good jobs. And he has failed to make life affordable.
Ford was asked about the NDP's encampment plan.
We're continuously funding shelters, and we're going to make sure we get people an opportunity to find a roof over their head and find the most important thing. What pays for all this is the economy.
Shortly before calling the election, his government added $75 million for municipalities to end encampments. And late last year, Ford's government introduced tough legislation on encampments.
This has to stop, and it will stop.
Giving law enforcement more powers to clear them and banning public drug use. That didn't pass before the early election call, but the PCs promise to bring that back if they win. The Association of Municipalities of Ontario has estimated more than 80,000 people in the province were homeless last year. The Liberal leader also blamed Ford for the increase.
There's a group of mayors along with this premier that wants to scoop these people up and move them and put them where, I ask you? Because we need a plan. They need to be housed.
Standing at the far side during the NDP announcement, someone who works directly with homeless people.
I'm still seeing people who are contending with frostbite, people with completely blackened toes, because it is really cold out there.
She'd like to know the cost of the NDP's plan.
I would like to see more dollar figures attached to things in terms of how we're going to support encampments and what that looks like. But I think the platform overall is right now the only one that I can feasibly support.
As for that cost, so far the party isn't providing any estimate.
That'll all come, but I will tell you this. We can't afford not to do this.
The NDP says it will be coming out with the information on how much this will cost for this promise and all others during this campaign. Lorenda Redicomp, CBC News, Toronto.
Colette Kennedy is here. Colette, what's in store for us?
Well, we do have some active weather on the way. We're talking about in the next 5, maybe 6 hours pushing towards us. So this is just a little activity out ahead of it. It's a very broad system, so broad that there are weather advisories for winter weather over somewhat 20 states or more, including an ice storm warning. And for southwestern Ontario, what does it mean for us? Well, yes, a freezing rain warning is in place. So this kind of moving in towards midnight and most of it through the overnight hours with some very slippery conditions that are coming our way. And in terms of tomorrow, we will get into some improvement as the day wears on in terms of the sky conditions and the road conditions, but not those winds. Those will be ramping up. More details on all of this coming up.
Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
The U.S.-Canada trade tension is forcing automakers on both sides of the border to rethink their trade relationship. As CBC's Lisa Shing tells us, concerns over the deeply integrated cross-border industry has industry groups thinking about ways to become more self-sufficient.
Uncertainty looms over the border city of Detroit, known as the Motor City for a reason. U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs paused but not canceled.
I don't know nothing about it. I just hope they figure it out.
It's just affecting, obviously, everyday life, which is hard.
We never had a problem with the north borders. It was the south.
On the other side of this river, Windsor, Ontario, two cities working as one with parts suppliers and assembly plants on either side. So integrated, a single car will cross the Canada-U.S. border multiple times in the manufacturing process. Tariffs would amplify production costs and ultimately prices for the consumer. Considering trade tensions, some in the industry say automakers need a backup plan, even though most agree the current arrangement is working.
We're going to have to look at trading with other partners, but at the end of the day, I hope we don't have to go there.
Well, I think they'll listen.
Industry groups in Michigan are thinking the same.
I'm sure there will be some adjustments to supply chain to make it as solid as possible.
Does that mean looking elsewhere other than Canada?
Well, I hope not. That means they need to localize things more. They may have to do that.
By localize, he means moving manufacturing to the U.S., but dismantling a decades-long partnership won't be easy.
It's not feasible. And the reality is the U.S. does depend on Canada and Mexico for a significant component of not just vehicle parts manufacturing, but final assembly.
The auto companies just can't change overnight and decide they're going to start building plants here and there and laying off workers.
There's another consideration in all of this. Analysts say the North American auto industry is much stronger together, and if that relationship is eroded or severed, it could give competitors like China a major advantage. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Detroit.
A potential trade war with the U.S. has many looking to Canada becoming more self-reliant. But one of the biggest hurdles remains interprovincial trade barriers. Now, threats from Donald Trump may be unintentionally giving Canada the motivation to tackle it. And even federal ministers say they're eager to pursue. Jean LaRoche reports.
Anita Anand was in Halifax to announce money for the Port of Halifax to prepare to handle ships powered by greener fuels. But Canada's internal trade minister was asked about a more pressing problem.
Can interprovincial trade barriers be dealt with, wiped away in 30 days?
Well, thank you for the question. The short answer to your question is yes.
It's a bold promise given the decades Ottawa and the provinces have been working on reducing red tape, or trying to come up with a common standard for food inspection, or even agreeing on the safest safety vest. Truckers have long complained about having to adhere to different rules in different provinces, wasting time and costing money. Despite how slow change has been, Anand is predicting, in her words, incredible fast-paced progress.
We are at a pivotal moment in the history of our country and in the future of the Canadian economy. And every minister at the table felt the need, as do I, as does our government, to act collectively, to seize the moment, and to do whatever we can to reduce those barriers to trade.
She says ports on the east and west coast also have a part to play in connecting Canadian businesses to new buyers in Europe and Asia.
When we see the threat of Trump tariffs coming to our country, the need for us to diversify our supply chains has never been more palpable, has never been more present.
The $22.5 million announced today for the Port of Halifax will prepare the city for the ships of the future to carry Canadian goods wherever there's a willing and affordable market. Jean Laroche, CBC News, Halifax.
There's a unique tournament coming to the city, and all it takes to be the best is one good flick. Dawson Chen has more.
Crokinole is the very Canadian board game of flicking wooden discs across a flat circle playing area. Just how serious can the action get? Well, players at a local Crokinole social club will say a glass of beer and a friendly attitude are essential parts of gameplay. But that doesn't mean Crokinole can't be competitive, says club organizer Glenn Hawks. A tournament happening in Essex February 8th is the first one in the region sanctioned by the National Crokinole Association.
You can still sign up. We got some room left, and there's people coming all over from southwestern Ontario probably, but it should be fun. Some professionals, some amateurs, some whatever.
The rules of Crokinole are simple. Players take turns flicking their pieces as close to the center of the board as possible. Landing a disc in the center hole is the best move, achieving 20 points. Knocking opposing pieces out of the scoring area is part of the game.
It's just an easy game to pick up. It's easy anyone can play it. Kids play it, old people play it. You can play it while you're drunk. You can just have fun with it.
Crokinole's exact origin isn't clear. Evidence of the game dating back to the late 1800s has been found in both Ontario and New York State. But historians are fairly certain the name of the game comes from the French word Crokinole, which refers to a kind of biscuit, but also a light hit. According to Hawks, the quality of your board makes all the difference in your appreciation of the game. Handcrafted boards are the game standard and can cost more than $400. But the good times, they're priceless, say players Troy Bryan and Susan McNamara.
It's a family game. You don't have to have a whole lot of experience. You can sit down and play right from the minute you come in. You can learn the rules in a couple minutes and you're flicking.
I'm not a very competitive person. I've never liked that. But this is fun, and it's an easy competitive game that we can play. And it didn't require a lot of physical activity.
Crokinole's social club gatherings at Chapter 2 Brewing are free to attend, with no equipment or expertise necessary. Dawson Chen, CBC News, Windsor.
I will say Crokinole is harder to play than it looks. If you have a story idea, just like the Crokinole tournament, that you want us to cover, send us your ideas. You can reach us by text at 519-984-2051 or email us at windsor@cbc.ca. We're going to take a look outside there. We've got some more news coming up. We've got reactions to a proposal from the U.S. to take control of the Gaza Strip. So stay with us. As part of the deal with Donald Trump to delay U.S. tariffs, the Prime Minister committed to designating Mexican cartels as terrorist organizations. While the scope of their influence in Canada is still unclear, there's evidence their reach is expanding in this country. Thomas Daglett reports.
This is what police say Mexican drug cartels are slipping into Canada. $83 million worth of cocaine, destined for every corner of the country, and recently traced to a murderous cartel making inroads here.
They were prominent. I mean, if you look at what we have here right now, this is a large load.
In a new pledge, the Prime Minister announced Ottawa will list cartels as terrorists, just one of the efforts to ward off U.S. tariffs, as the Trump administration issues this fresh warning.
The Mexican drug cartels are rapidly expanding in Canada, and that's a danger.
Cartels are known to smuggle truckloads of drugs across the U.S. border and into Canada. But a recent bust in BC suggests they're also producing enough here to send abroad. At this super lab, police say the chemicals seized would have amounted to nearly 100 million doses of fentanyl.
The fact that they are here, I will say thriving, it is dangerous for sure.
Journalist Luis Najera investigated the cartels in Mexico and fled to Canada. He sees their growing influence here, with criminal groups exploiting Pacific and Atlantic ports and laundering millions.
It has been significantly increasing, of course, because of the advantages that Canada offers.
But experts wonder what help will come now, with a trail of murders left behind, including the cartel-linked shooting of an innocent Indian couple in Ontario, still unresolved.
The benefit of designating the cartels is primarily a political one in terms of appeasing Trump and signaling to our American allies that we are willing to play ball.
The public safety minister insists the move will help authorities track the cartel's money and disrupt their operations once they're listed as terrorist groups alongside ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Thomas Dagg, CBC News, Toronto.
Donald Trump's stunning proposal for the U.S. to take ownership of the Gaza Strip and forcibly remove Palestinians is drawing strong global reaction. As Sasha Petrusik finds out, there are fears the U.S. president's comments could also jeopardize the fragile ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas.
In Gaza itself, a great deal of disappointment and betrayal, especially since many of these people have been moving around Gaza itself for a long time in what they still call the Nakba, the great catastrophe of how they were pushed aside in order for Israel to be created. They are saying that if America is not going to be their friend, they will have to look elsewhere.
This is the Palestinian land, and the only people can decide what they want to do is the Palestinian people.
Several European countries said that they only see a two-state solution as the real solution, including the United Kingdom, France, Spain, Ireland, as well as other countries like China and Russia, who have supported a Palestinian state. But here in Israel, there has been support.
Let's hope for everyone. It's a win-win situation if it will happen to everyone, except Hamas, of course.
Then maybe it will be replaced by Western values, as in businesses, real estate, commerce, tourism.
I mean, it's not going to happen in a minute. Maybe we tried so many things. We gave them land. We did the Oslo. So what do I say? I think he has a point.
Now, all of this, though, is begging the question, what will happen to the current ceasefire arrangement, which needs to be negotiated, needs to be continued if, in fact, this war is going to end and if, in fact, all of the Israeli hostages are going to come home. The current phase will not achieve that, and Trump said he wants it to end, partly so that the reconstruction can start. But this places one more issue as a roadblock to that, and Hamas says it could, in fact, lead to more violence. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
We've got Colette Kennedy coming back to join us with your full weather forecast. It's going to be a messy one, so you want to stay tuned. Colette Kennedy is back with us. Colette, I like the color purple, but that's a lot of purple we're looking at there. So what's happening? Tell us.
Yes, hopefully you'll still like it. Let's not associate it with freezing rain, but that is indeed the color and what this denotes here for southwestern Ontario, this freezing rain warning. The piece of good news is the timing on this is that much of it really is going to be in these overnight hours starting close to midnight tonight and kind of wrapping up, at least the freezing rain portion mostly wrapping up by early tomorrow morning, 5 a.m., 6 a.m. But if you do have reason, if work keeps you on the roads at night, shift work, anything that is going to have you out there, I do just want you to know how slippery some of these surfaces can be. So that is the potential there. The temperature profile, we're at -4. We're actually going to have that temperature steady, then coming up a little bit as we go towards tomorrow morning. And by tomorrow afternoon, we'll actually be above freezing. However, yeah, a little bit of flurry activity. This is not the main event. I was showing you earlier in the show. It's a very broad system, in fact, but we've got some of that energy right here pushing into the Ohio Valley, and all that pink you can see is either mixed precipitation, freezing rain, or ice pellets in there. So it's going to hit stateside even worse, but still it can have that potential to be so dangerous on the roadways here. So let me take you through what's to come in terms of that timeline. I mentioned as we get closer to midnight, it's just kind of on the doorstep here, may start as a little bit of snow again. So we get a break from what's happening right now and then starting to snow. Then we get into some freezing rain or that mixing at times. It may be lighter like freezing drizzle. And then by 8 a.m., it's made haste and it's all the way over towards the Niagara region and taking snow eastward with most of the mixed precipitation staying south of the lower Great Lakes by then, but not through these overnight hours. On the back side, like behind the system, the winds are going to be quite strong. Not as bad for southwestern Ontario, but again, if you're traveling or you drive a high-profile vehicle, those winds getting very strong, approaching cottage country. Some of the gusts may exceed 80 or even getting close to 100 kilometers an hour. So they'll be gusty enough for us, but just looking at the ice accumulation, that possibility of a buildup of 1 to 2 millimeters as this passes through as well. Yes, the chance for getting some snow, a few centimeters in there, but that likely kind of melting away into the afternoon as the temperature rises. And there's a look at some of those winds. For us, we're more in that 50 to 60, and those stronger ones are actually going to be tomorrow night, okay? So that temperature -5, then through the overnight coming up to about -2, -3, 3 degrees by tomorrow afternoon, and another system coming through, Jennifer, potentially on Saturday.
Thanks for that, Colette. That is it for CBC Windsor News. Everyone have a great night.
Good night.